Her granddad, bless his stubborn heart, had no Wi-Fi, no cell service, and a satellite TV that only showed the Weather Channel and infomercials for things no one would ever need. He dropped her off for a month, calling it a technology detox, and left her with a long list of chores and an emergency satellite phone she was to use only if a bear literally ate the cabin. For a city girl like Luna, who thought wild meant a rogue pigeon in the park, this place was a foreign planet. The silence was the strangest part. It wasn't empty but full of the constant hum of a million hidden things. She was 15, armed with a sketchbook, a ridiculous amount of bug spray, and the solemn teenage mission of escaping her parents' well-meaning but suffocating rules. That's probably why she almost had a heart attack when she stumbled upon him. She was trying to draw a particularly lumpy-looking squirrel on a rock when she heard the slightest snap of a twig behind her. She spun around, clutching her sketchbook like a shield, expecting a bear or maybe a deer or maybe even one of those infomercial pitchmen from TV. Instead, there he was, standing so still he seemed like a part of the forest itself. He couldn't have been more than a year or two older than her, but there was an otherworldly stillness about him, a stillness that made every muscle in her body go perfectly rigid. He had dark, messy hair and eyes that were the color of the forest floor after a rain, deep and rich and ancient. And his gaze, it held a knowledge that no teenage boy should ever possess. He looked at her not with surprise, but with a quiet, profound recognition, as if he'd been expecting her all along. The whole scene was so deeply, comically awkward that her teenage brain decided the only appropriate response was a nervous, high-pitched giggle. He didn't laugh back. He just watched her. She felt the heat of a blush creep up her neck. She fumbled for something to say. Hi. Sorry, I didn't mean to invade your space. I was just trying to draw a squirrel. She held up her sketchbook to show him the terrible, misshapen squirrel, and he finally smiled. It was a small, gentle thing that made the sun seem a little brighter. It's a good squirrel, he said, his voice a low, melodic rumble that felt like it belonged to the earth itself. He looks a little startled, but I get it. He introduced himself as Orion, and they spent the rest of the summer together. Luna learned that his family lived in the mountains, a place so remote they were completely off the grid. He said his family, his people, were deeply connected to the land. She in turn told him about her life. About her weird friends, her love for terrible pop music, and her dream of becoming a veterinarian. He listened with an intensity that made her feel like the most fascinating person on the planet. She learned that he had never eaten a cheeseburger, that he thought the idea of a movie theater was baffling, and that he could run faster and climb higher than any person she had ever met. They laughed about the small, ridiculous differences between their worlds, and in those moments the world felt so simple. One day he led her to a secret place, a small, secluded waterfall tucked away behind a thick curtain of trees. The water fell into a crystal-clear pool, and the air was alive with the scent of wet moss and wildflowers. "This is a special place," he said, his voice quiet. "My family comes here. But now, it's ours." The sound of her heart was so loud she thought he must be able to hear it. This was the first time she felt it, the undeniable feeling of a soul-deep connection, a feeling that went beyond a crush. This was the kind of feeling that changes you forever. They spent their nights lying on the roof of her granddad's shed, looking up at the impossibly bright stars. Orion would tell her stories of his people, of their strong bonds, of a world she never knew existed. He spoke of his pack, a family of people so intertwined they could feel each other's happiness and pain. He told her, cautiously, that he was a werewolf, something that should have sounded completely absurd but somehow felt completely true. He just fit like a missing puzzle piece. He showed her the faint scars on his arms from scrapes and fights, and he told her that his body healed at a rate that would make a human doctor faint. When he looked at her, his eyes held a vulnerability that broke her heart a little. "We are a good people," he'd say, "but we are not without our complications." She knew then that his family was not the same as a human family. It was something more. On their last night together, under a sky so full of stars it looked like spilled glitter, they stood at their waterfall. He took her hand, his palm rough and warm against hers. "I have to go back to the mountains," he said, and she felt a wave of cold dread wash over her. He looked so sad, so distant, as if a weight was pressing down on his shoulders. My family needs me. But I promise, Luna. I will find my way back to you. I will. She believed him with every fiber of her being. But he never came back. She waited for weeks, then months, then years. She sent letters to him that never reached an address, talked about him to friends who thought he was an imaginary summer boy. He had vanished as if he had never been there at all. The memory of him became a quiet, aching ache in her heart, a wound that never quite healed. The promise they made felt like a beautiful, impossible dream. She went back to her city life, but a part of her always remained in those woods at that waterfall, waiting for a boy with ancient eyes and a gentle soul to keep his promise. She had learned early on that not all dreams came true no matter how real they felt. She had to let him go. At least she had to pretend she did. She got a job, found an apartment, and built a good, stable life. It wasn't the life of a fairy tale, but it was safe. And after years of heartbreak, she was convinced that safe was enough. She learned to be happy on her own. She was content, and that was all that mattered. Chapter 1. Several years later. Luna loved her apartment. It was a cozy little place on the 3rd floor. The living room was filled with plants that seemed to have more personality than most people she knew, and the kitchen had a window that overlooked a small, quiet park. She spent her days at the animal clinic, helping vets mend broken wings and fractured bones, finding a deep, quiet fulfillment in the work. It was a good life. It was a stable life. But sometimes, in the dead of night when the city's hum was at its lowest, she would feel a quiet, aching hum in her own soul, a feeling that something was missing. That something was not, she was fairly certain, a high-profile charity gala. Her best friend, Chloe, who had somehow gotten them tickets. Come on, Luna. It's for a good cause, and you'll get to wear that dress you bought 3 years ago and never took out of the closet. Luna had sighed, knowing there was no use arguing. The gala itself, held in a sprawling modern art gallery, felt like a different world entirely. The air was thick with the scent of expensive perfume, polished marble. She clung to her champagne flute like a life preserver, trying to look comfortable while 100 conversations swirled around her like a living organism. Look at this place, Chloe whispered, her eyes wide. It's like they have a separate budget just for making people feel inadequate. Luna had to laugh. Tell me about it. My purse is probably worth less than the canapes. As Chloe dragged her toward the open bar, Luna's gaze swept over the crowd. She saw beautiful people with surgically precise smiles, talking about art she didn't understand and stocks she couldn't afford. It was all a polished, glittering blur. And then she saw him. He was standing alone in the center of a small circle of people, but he wasn't talking to any of them. He was simply present. He had broad shoulders that strained the fabric of his impeccably tailored suit, and hair so dark it seemed to absorb the light around it. There was no polite smile on his face, no practiced ease. Just a quiet, powerful stillness that seemed to draw all the energy in the room to him. The chatter around him seemed to dim, the music faded to a whisper. He wasn't just handsome, he was a force of nature. And then his head turned. His eyes, the color of molten gold, found hers across the crowded room. The jolt was so immediate that Luna's breath hitched in her throat. It was not like the spark of attraction, not the flutter of butterflies. It was a deep, resonant hum that started in the very center of her being and radiated outward, a spiritual thrumming that felt ancient and fated. It was the feeling of coming home to a place she never knew she had been. Every myth, every old tale of soulmates and destiny she had ever read, suddenly felt real. It was terrifying and exhilarating all at once. He felt it too. She saw it in his eyes. The momentary flash of surprise was quickly replaced by an intense, overwhelming recognition. A muscle in his jaw ticked. He didn't hesitate. He didn't need to. He simply started walking toward her. Chloe, noticing her friend had gone perfectly still, nudged her arm. Luna? You okay? You look like you've seen a ghost. Luna couldn't answer. She could only watch him move through the crowd. People seemed to instinctively part for him like a river making way for a boulder. His presence was so commanding that it was almost palpable, a silent force that made the very air around him feel thick with power. He stopped in front of her and the scent hit her fully. It was intoxicating and raw. His hand reached out and his fingers wrapped around hers, a warm, possessive grip that felt both gentle and utterly unbreakable. Her glass of champagne slipped from her nerveless fingers, shattering on the polished floor with a small, quiet clatter. "Mine," he said in a low voice that was meant for her ears only. It wasn't a question or a declaration of intent. It was a primal, absolute statement of fact. His golden eyes, burning with an almost feral intensity, never left hers. Luna's mind went blank. Her mouth opened but no words came out. She was both terrified and utterly enthralled. The feeling was 1,000 times more potent than anything she had ever experienced. Chloe, ever the practical one, finally managed to stammer, "Whoa, hey there, dude. I think you owe her a new champagne glass." The man, Silas as Luna would learn later, didn't even glance at Chloe. His attention was completely and utterly focused on Luna. He let go of her hand only to bring his thumb to her wrist, feeling her pulse thrumming wildly. "You have a name," he stated, his voice a quiet command. "Luna," she breathed out, the word a whisper. "Luna," he repeated, his voice a low caress. "It's beautiful. My name is Silas." He then did the most unexpected thing. He took her arm, a firm but not unfriendly hold, and began to walk. He was leading her away, away from the chaos of the gala, away from the surprised stares of the crowd, away from Chloe who was gaping at them with her mouth open. "Wait, where are you going?" Luna started, her voice a jumble of panic and protest. Silas didn't break stride. "We're leaving." "Leaving? I can't just." "Yes, you can," he said, his voice as calm as a summer storm. He had a car waiting outside, a sleek black sedan. He opened the passenger door for her, his movements impossibly fluid and graceful. She looked back at Chloe, who simply gave her a wide-eyed shrug that clearly said, "What just happened?" Luna didn't know what just happened. All she knew was that this man, this stranger, had looked at her from across a crowded room and in a single moment, had changed the entire course of her life. She was getting into a car with a man she didn't know, going somewhere she didn't know, and she had never felt so utterly terrified and so utterly alive. The car pulled away from the curb, leaving the glittering gala behind. She was now in his world, a world of intoxicating scents and powerful commands. She looked over at Silas, whose eyes were fixed on the road, a small, knowing smile playing on his lips. She had just met him, but her soul told her that their story had been written ages ago. And that thought, more than anything, scared her half to death. Chapter 2. The drive from the gala was a blur of city lights and silent contemplation. Luna sat in the passenger seat of Silas's sleek black sedan, her mind a chaotic jumble of questions and the wordless, guttural whine that still echoed in her soul. She risked a glance at him. He was seated beside her, still and calm, yet radiating an energy so impossibly fluid and controlled it was almost unnerving. The intoxicating scent of him filled the small space, and a nervous giggle escaped her lips. "Something funny?" he asked, his voice low. No, it's just," she stammered, "this is the most spontaneous thing I've ever done. Usually, my Friday nights involve a good book and a questionable amount of takeout." A small, genuine smile touched his lips. "I can make takeout happen if you want. But my driver is taking us somewhere I think you'll like." He took her to a penthouse apartment with a view of the city that seemed to stretch on forever. It felt like stepping into the pages of a magazine. Luna, who had just spent the last 2 years decorating her cozy apartment with second-hand furniture and a collection of mismatched mugs, felt a little bit like a barn cat in a very expensive art museum. The first week was a beautiful, dizzying blur. Silas was relentless in his pursuit, but in a way that felt thrilling, not overwhelming. He didn't just ask her on dates, he commandeered her entire schedule. A last-minute trip to an exclusive spa. A helicopter ride over the city at sunset. Dinner at restaurants where the menu was a single laminated card and the prices were whispered like a secret. Luna's internal monologue was working overtime. Is this what a first date is like for the 1%? I feel like I need a separate spreadsheet just to keep track of this. Is this a date? Is this a full-on commitment? Am I going to be the subject of a reality TV show? Her world, once so predictable and quiet, was now a vibrant, moving tapestry of experiences, and Silas was the artist. He was charming and attentive, but with an undercurrent of raw power that Luna found both thrilling and a little bit frightening. He told her stories about his pack, not as a family of wolves in the wild, but as a collective of professionals living and working within human society. "We are modern," he'd say, his eyes glinting. "We don't need to howl at the moon in a forest. We can do that from a skyscraper. We use our strengths to build empires, to influence, to shape the human world from the inside out." He spoke of his dominance not as a form of aggression, but as a form of protection. He would call her at all hours just to know where she was. When she was out with Chloe, he would send a car to pick her up, insisting that she was not to walk home alone. At first, Luna found it incredibly sweet. He was just a man who wanted to protect his mate. Right? She had a fleeting thought about her old friend, the memory of Orion and his gentle, respectful ways, but she pushed it away. This was different. This was meant to be. This was her fated mate. The undeniable pull of their bond was the answer for everything. It explained why a man so powerful would be so obsessed with her, a simple vet assistant. It explained why she, who had always played it safe, was ready to jump headfirst into this whirlwind romance. The scent of him, the touch of him, the low rumble of his voice. It all felt like a confirmation from the universe that this was where she was meant to be. One night, after a week of non-stop, extravagant dates, they were walking along a quiet pier under the moonlight. The salt air was cool and crisp, and Luna felt a profound sense of peace. Silas stopped her, his hands coming to rest on her waist. His gaze was intense and possessive, but for the first time Luna felt no fear. Just a deep, aching desire. "Luna," he said, his voice a low, gravelly whisper. "My wolf. He knows you are mine. I've never felt this before. This is what they write about in the old stories. This is the bond." He leaned in, and his kiss was everything she had imagined and more. It wasn't a gentle, exploring kiss. It was a claim. A statement. It was deep and consuming and filled with all the raw power of his alpha nature. The kiss sent a shiver of electricity through her, a current of heat that started at her lips and spread to every part of her body. In that moment, with his lips on hers and his arms holding her to him, Luna was completely, utterly convinced. This was it. This was destiny. Later that night, as she lay in his arms, her head on his chest, listening to the powerful rhythmic thrum of his heartbeat, she felt completely safe, completely loved, completely his. She had found her fairy tale, a passionate, protective alpha who would move mountains for her. It wasn't a gentle, quiet love, but a fierce, all-consuming one. And after so many years of feeling empty, that fire was everything she had ever dreamed of. She had no idea that a fire this hot could burn as easily as it could warm. Chapter 3. Life with Silas was an exhilarating, beautiful blur. He was a force of nature, charming, attentive, and so completely devoted to Luna that it sometimes took her breath away. They moved in together after only 2 months, and her small, quiet life was transformed into a constant stream of lavish dates, last-minute trips, and a passion so consuming it felt like a fire. He was her fairy tale, and she believed with every fiber of her being that she had found her destiny. The quiet ache of loneliness that had once lived in her soul was gone, replaced by a love that felt powerful and fated. Tonight, however, was a return to her old life. She was at a work-sponsored event, a fundraiser for a local animal shelter. The venue was less glamorous than the places Silas took her, smelling of damp dog towels and fresh sawdust, which to Luna was a scent 1,000 times better than expensive perfume. She was talking to a kind, lanky coworker named David about a difficult case they had worked on together that morning. David was a gentle guy, and his kindness was so familiar and comfortable it felt like a warm blanket. "I still can't believe that beagle pulled through," David said, running a hand through his hair. "It was all you, Luna. If you hadn't been so quick to stabilize him, he wouldn't have made it to surgery." Luna felt a warmth spread through her chest. "We were a team, David. You were there right with me." Just then a hush fell over the room. The subtle shift in the energy was so profound that Luna and David stopped talking and looked up. Standing in the doorway, perfectly out of place in his tailored suit, was Silas. He wasn't smiling. His face was a mask of stillness, his eyes narrowed as they scanned the crowd, finally landing on Luna. A low, uneasy hum of nervous energy rippled through the room. It was like a storm cloud had just rolled in, swallowing the sunlight. Silas didn't walk, he glided, moving with a silent, lethal grace that was completely unlike the social butterflies around them. He came straight for Luna, ignoring the polite greetings from her co-workers who seemed to instinctively shy away from him. He came to a stop beside her, his presence a wall of intimidating masculinity. He didn't look at David. He didn't need to. He simply placed a firm hand on the small of Luna's back. The message was clear and chilling. "Luna," he said, his voice a low, gravelly rumble. "I've been looking for you." David, bless his awkward heart, just smiled nervously. "Oh hey man. I'm David from the clinic. We were just talking about..." Silas's golden eyes finally flickered to David, and the look in them was so cold and possessive that David's words died in his throat. Silas's jaw was tight, and Luna felt a ripple of tension pass through his arm, a silent but potent warning. "We were just leaving," Silas stated, a finality in his tone that brooked no argument. He didn't wait for her to say goodbye. He just guided her out of the room, her heart pounding against her ribs. She was mortified. On the drive home, the silent rage radiating from him was a tangible thing. He kept his eyes on the road, but his grip on the steering wheel was white-knuckled. "What was that?" Luna finally whispered. He didn't answer. He just drove faster, his focus a frightening, singular point of rage that was completely directed at her, even if he wasn't looking at her. The moment they were in their apartment, the facade shattered. He slammed the door shut, the sound of violent punctuation marked to the quiet anger he had been nursing. He turned to her, his face a contorted mask of fury and heartbreak. "What were you doing with him?" he demanded, his voice a low growl that she felt in her bones. "I was talking to my coworker Silas. He's a friend. We were just talking about a case. I saw the way he was looking at you. I saw the way you smiled at him," he snarled, taking a step toward her. His eyes, usually golden and warm, had a cold, feral light in them that made her instinctively flinch. "Silas, you're scaring me," Luna said, her voice shaking. "I'm scaring you?" he roared, the sound echoing off the walls. "Do you think it's easy? The wolf. He knows you are mine. Every time another male looks at you, every time you smile at them, he feels it. It's a possessiveness I can't control." He was standing over her, his body language pure rage. He raised his hand not to strike her, but in a gesture of pure, unbridled fury. He slammed his fist into the wall a few inches from her head. The sound was a loud, sickening crack, followed by the soft, crumbling hiss of drywall. A small crater appeared in the wall, a perfect, fist-sized indentation. Luna froze, her eyes wide with shock and fear, staring at the small hole. The silence that followed was more deafening than the explosion. Then, just as quickly as it had come, the rage vanished. The feral light in his eyes was replaced by horror. His body seemed to deflate. He sank to his knees, his hands trembling. He looked at the hole in the wall, then at her, and his eyes filled with tears. "Luna," he whispered, his voice broken. "I am so sorry. I didn't mean to. The wolf, he took over. I would never hurt you. You have to believe me. Please. I'm so sorry." He looked so heartbroken, so utterly ashamed, that Luna's own fear gave way to a powerful wave of pity. He buried his face in his hands, his broad shoulders shaking with silent sobs. She slowly knelt down, her hands shaking as she reached out to him. "Silas," she whispered. He looked up at her, his eyes red. "It will never happen again," he promised, his voice choked with emotion. "I will get him under control. I swear it. This isn't who I am. You're my mate. I love you more than anything." His raw vulnerability was a powerful weapon. He was the perfect, loving, dominant alpha from her fantasy, but for a split second he had been a terrifying monster. And now he was a broken man pleading for her forgiveness. The fated mate bond, the pull she felt for him, screamed at her to forgive him, to heal him. She wrapped her arms around him, holding him as he sobbed, and she told herself, as he had promised, that this was just an isolated incident, a byproduct of his immense power. It wouldn't happen again. It couldn't. Chapter 4. The weeks that followed the incident with the wall were a fragile, beautiful truce. Silas was everything Luna had fallen in love with and more. He was tender, attentive, and incredibly protective. He woke her up with coffee and flowers every morning, made all her favorite meals, and treated her like a goddess. He had been so genuinely remorseful, so full of self-loathing, that Luna had no choice but to forgive him. He even bought a large, elaborate painting to hang over the hole he had made in the wall, as if a beautiful piece of art could cover up the memory of his rage. For a little while their life together was a paradise, a perfect little bubble built for two. But the truce was as delicate as glass. The second incident came not from jealousy, but from something entirely ordinary. Luna had just gotten home from a long day at the clinic, exhausted and ready to relax. She couldn't find her apartment key. She searched her purse, her pockets, and the bottom of her work bag, a low hum of frustration building in her. Silas watched her, his expression growing tense. "What are you doing?" he asked, his voice tight. "I can't find my key," she said, her frustration bleeding into her voice. "I swear I had it this morning." A flash of irrational fury crossed his face. "This is our home. You can't just lose the key to our home. What if something happens? What if someone finds it?" he snarled, his voice rising in volume while unlocking the door with his own keys. Luna was taken aback. "Silas, it's just a key. It's not a big deal." That was the wrong thing to say. He let out a low, menacing growl that made the hair on Luna's arms stand on end. He stormed into the kitchen, his body radiating a palpable rage. He grabbed a simple kitchen lamp from the counter and, in a blind fury, threw it against the wall. The sound of shattering ceramic and glass echoed through the apartment, a violent, ugly sound. He then looked at her with a feral intensity that made her shrink back. Just as quickly the rage vanished. He stood there, chest heaving, his eyes wide with horror as he looked at the shattered mess on the floor. He ran a hand through his hair, his body trembling. "Luna," he whispered, his voice broken. "I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to do that. I don't know why. My wolf. He gets so angry when I feel like I'm losing control. Please tell me you're okay." "I'm so sorry." Luna, her heart pounding, just nodded, unable to speak. He was on the floor, picking up the pieces, his hands shaking so much he cut himself. He blamed himself for the irrational anger, for the loss of control, for the violence. He promised it would never happen again. And Luna, caught between her fear and the overpowering love she felt for him, helped him clean up the mess. The next day he bought her a ridiculously expensive new kitchen set, as if that could fix a broken trust. The cycle began, and it was a terrifyingly predictable one. A few weeks later, a misunderstanding about a text message from a male coworker caused him to rip a door off its hinges, splintering the wood. He swore he'd heard an insult he couldn't control his wolf's reaction to. He sobbed in her arms, telling her how much she meant to him and how much he hated this part of himself. He spent the next day fixing the door and bought her a new, expensive handbag. Another time, a forgotten phone on the counter before a night out led to him picking up a small end table and throwing it across the room, smashing it to splinters. He said he just needed to make sure she wasn't cheating, and his wolf had a bad feeling. His apology was so full of self-loathing, so sincere, that Luna found herself comforting him, telling him it was okay. He bought her a new custom-made end table. Luna began to walk on eggshells. Her life became a carefully curated performance, a constant act of trying to anticipate his moods. She started avoiding her friends. Chloe would call and Luna would say she was too busy, too tired, or had a sudden headache. The truth was she was afraid. Afraid of a casual comment sparking a rage. Afraid of Chloe's perceptive eyes seeing the cracks in her facade. She was tired of making up excuses. She stopped inviting friends over, her home feeling more and more like a fortress. When she went to work, she was careful not to linger after her shift. She kept her conversations with male coworkers strictly professional. She had become an expert at sensing Silas's moods, a skill she never wanted to have. The once vibrant, independent woman was now a shell of herself, living in a constant state of low-grade anxiety. Silas, for his part, was completely blind to it. He was a master of the pendulum swing, a perfect mixture of loving partner and unpredictable storm. His "I'm sorry's" were always followed by passionate affection, his promises to change were always followed by extravagant gifts. He was convinced that their fated bond was so strong, so powerful, that it would eventually tame his wolf. He would whisper to her, "We are meant to be. This is just a test. Our love is so fierce that it scares my wolf. But we can overcome this, Luna. We can. Because it's you and me against the world." And Luna, alone in the world she had built around him, clung to those words like a lifeline. She desperately wanted to believe him. She convinced herself that the broken things in her apartment, the shattered glass and the splintered wood, were just growing pains. She told herself that she was the only one who truly understood him, the only one who could handle his immense power, and that was a kind of strength she had to possess. She was caught in a dangerous, beautiful storm, and she wasn't ready to let go of the idea that this storm, this man, this wolf, was her destiny. Chapter 5. The space between Luna and her friends had grown into a chasm. Her phone buzzed with texts from Chloe, each one more insistent than the last. Luna would answer with a string of excuses. A migraine, a long shift, a sudden family emergency. She'd even invented a fictional cat at the clinic named Bartholomew who had a series of increasingly bizarre and time-consuming ailments. The truth was she was afraid. She was afraid of the questions in Chloe's eyes, afraid of having to lie, and most of all, afraid of the judgment she knew would follow if anyone saw the man Silas became behind closed doors. One Tuesday, after yet another flimsy excuse, Chloe finally cut through the charade with a single text. "I'm not mad, Luna. I'm worried. Meet me at the daily grind, no excuses." The simple directness of it broke through Luna's defenses. She agreed. The coffee shop was a neutral ground. Chloe was already there, a half-empty latte in front of her. She didn't hug Luna. She just looked at her, her expression open and deeply concerned. "You look exhausted," Chloe said, her voice soft. Luna managed a weak smile. "I've been so busy with work." Chloe nodded, her gaze unwavering. "Bartholomew get better yet?" Luna's cheeks flushed. He's recovering. It was a close call." Chloe sighed. "Luna, we need to talk about Silas." The quiet honesty of it made Luna's stomach clench. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic bird trying to escape its cage. "There's nothing to talk about. We're great. It's a lot. He's intense. It's just been a stressful few months." Chloe reached across the table and took Luna's hand. Her touch was gentle and firm. "Pay no more lies. I miss you. We used to talk about everything. Now you're either with him or you're making up stories about a cat. Does he make you happy? I mean, really, truly happy?" "More often than not." Luna's mind raced. Was she happy? The highs were so high. The extravagant gifts, the passionate nights, the feeling of being loved with an intensity she never knew existed. But the lows were so terrifying. The walking on eggshells, the fear, the isolation. She suddenly felt dizzy, as if she were a tightrope walker, trying to find her balance between the two extremes. "He loves me," Luna said, her voice small. "He says we're fated mates. It's a powerful bond. Sometimes his wolf gets really protective. He just can't control it. He feels terrible afterward. He really does." Chloe's expression didn't change, but her grip on Luna's hand tightened. "Luna, true love isn't something you have to apologize for. True love isn't something you have to clean up. Love shouldn't feel like you're constantly holding your breath, waiting for the other shoe to drop. Do you feel safe with him?" The question hit Luna like a physical blow. The simple, honest truth of it echoed in her mind. Do you feel safe? She was safe right now, sitting in a crowded coffee shop. But in the quiet privacy of her own home, with the constant threat of Silas's unpredictable temper, the answer was a simple, terrifying no. "He would never hurt me," Luna said, the words coming out sounding more like a plea than a statement. "His human side would never. It's his wolf." Chloe just shook her head, her eyes filled with a sad wisdom. "Love is a choice, Luna. And it's not just about what he feels for you. It's about what you deserve. And you deserve to feel safe. You deserve a love that doesn't demand you sacrifice your peace for its passion." The words were a direct challenge to everything Luna had convinced herself of. The fated mate bond, the idea of destiny, the narrative that she was the only one who could handle his immense power. All of it seemed to crumble under the weight of Chloe's simple logic. The seeds of doubt had been planted, and they were growing into a forest of questions that Luna had no answers for. She left the coffee shop feeling more confused than when she had arrived. She wandered through the streets, the words and phrases bouncing around in her head. Love shouldn't hurt. You deserve to feel safe. She felt the deep, profound loneliness she hadn't felt since her life with Silas began, but this time, it was a different kind of loneliness. A hollow ache of knowing she was alone in this with him. The anxiety settled in her stomach, and by the time she got home she felt sick. Her period was late. She had been so consumed with the chaos of her relationship that she hadn't even noticed. A sudden, cold dread washed over her. She went to the pharmacy and bought a pregnancy test, her hands trembling as she paid. Back in her own bathroom she took the test. She sat on the edge of the tub, her mind blank with a silent prayer. A minute passed. Then another. She slowly picked up the stick and looked at it. 2 lines. The news was a gut punch. 1,000 different emotions washed over her at once. Overwhelming joy, a small, helpless little human, a part of her and a part of the man she loved. And pure absolute terror. Her child was now irrevocably tied to a man who, in a fit of rage, had broken a wall and smashed a vase to pieces. A cold, hard truth slammed into her with a finality that made her gasp. She had to protect this new life. She couldn't bring a child into this cycle of fear and violence. For the first time, the reason to leave was more powerful than the reason to stay. She had to end it. She couldn't risk her child's future on a promise she knew he might not be able to keep. Chapter 6. The news of her pregnancy had settled over Luna like a heavy velvet blanket. It was both a blessing and a curse, a source of overwhelming joy and a cold, sharp blade of fear. She hadn't told Silas yet. She had been waiting for the right moment, a day when the air in their apartment felt particularly still, a day when his love felt so solid it could never be broken. But those days were becoming fewer and further between. Her protective instincts, a powerful new force she didn't know she possessed, were already on a low, constant hum. She was no longer just Luna. She was a mother, and the responsibility felt immense. She found herself making small, subconscious changes to her life. She stopped leaving her keys on the counter and she started doing the dishes immediately, so there was no reason for a dropped plate. She navigated their conversations like a minefield, careful not to ask questions that might trigger a response she couldn't handle. The constant walking on eggshells was exhausting, but it was worth it for the quiet peace of their home. Tonight she had decided to tell him. They were in the living room, a soft lamp casting a warm glow over a new coffee table. A replacement for the last one he had splintered in a fit of rage over a forgotten dinner reservation. Luna had rehearsed it 1,000 times in her head. She would tell him calmly, gently, and she would emphasize the joy. She would remind him of their love, of their destiny, of the powerful bond that was about to bring new life into the world. She would use all of the words he used to convince her to stay. Silas was talking about a business deal. He was charismatic and sure of himself, the man she had fallen for at the gala. "This new deal will secure our place at the top for years," he said, a triumphant smile on his lips. It was a big risk, but a necessary one. Luna smiled. "That's wonderful, Silas." A small, insignificant detail triggered it. Luna, in her nervousness, had set her new floral teacup on the table, a teacup she'd chosen with an eye toward the delicate safety of her unborn child. The cup left a faint watermark on the polished wood. Silas's smile vanished. His eyes, in an instant, were cold and hard. He looked at the watermark, his jaw ticking. You have to be more careful with things. This is a very expensive table. You can't just put a hot cup on it without a coaster. His voice was flat and menacing, a prelude to the storm. Luna's heart began to pound a frantic rhythm against her ribs. She felt the familiar jolt of fear, a cold current shooting down her spine. I'm sorry, I'll wipe it off. You always say that, he growled, the low sound vibrating in his chest. You don't listen. You don't think. You just do what you want without any regard for what I tell you. Silas, it's a watermark. I can get a coaster, I promise, Luna said, her voice shaking. A coaster? He snarled, his wolf beginning to rise to the surface. His golden eyes began to take on a feral intensity. You think a coaster is the problem? The problem is that you refuse to listen. My pack, my business, my entire life. I command them. And you refuse to take me seriously. His voice rose in volume and his body began to radiate a terrifying heat. Luna flinched, instinctively placing a protective hand on her belly. This simple, innocent gesture seemed to ignite a final, explosive rage in him. The look in his eyes wasn't just anger. It was pure, unadulterated fury from his wolf. In a blind rage, he swept his arm across the coffee table. He wasn't aiming for her, but for the things that represented her small human rebellions. He hit the exquisite, ornate vase she had bought for the table. It flew through the air, a beautiful, delicate thing spinning through the space between them. It hit the wall with a loud, sickening crash, shattering into 1,000 pieces. Sharp, jagged shards of porcelain and glass flew back, spinning through the air like deadly frozen rain. A few of the pieces, small and impossibly sharp, ricocheted off the wall and flew directly toward Luna. The shards flew past her, one of them pinging off her shoulder. But her mind registered the trajectory. The razor-sharp pieces had flown inches from her pregnant belly, from the vulnerable life she carried. The terror was immediate and absolute, a cold terror that made her blood run cold. She looked down at her hand, still resting protectively on her stomach, and then up at the broken, beautiful mess on the floor. She looked at the man who was now standing, chest heaving, his face a contorted mask of pure rage. Then just as quickly the rage vanished. He saw what he had done. He saw the broken pieces on the floor, the shocked look on Luna's face. He let out a low, whimpering moan. He stumbled over to her, his knees giving out as he fell to the floor, grabbing her legs. Oh my God, he sobbed, his voice broken. Luna, I didn't mean it. The wolf, I would never hurt you. I'm so sorry, please. I'm so sorry. His tears, his promises, his desperate pleas for forgiveness, they were all real. She saw his genuine remorse. She heard the heartbreak in his voice. But this time it was different. This time the love she felt for him did not outweigh the fear. Her mind, so long trapped in the cycle of his abuse, was now crystal clear. She looked at the glittering shards of glass on the floor, then at her own trembling hand on her stomach. The beautiful, delicate vase was broken forever. The love she had for him was so profound it hurt, but she knew with an absolute terrifying certainty that she could not and would not risk her child's life on the hope that he would one day be able to control his rage. The promise of never again was just a promise, a meaningless one in the face of what he was. The cycle had to end. No. She would not be his victim, and she would not allow her child to be his next one. The terror of his rage was nothing compared to the fierce, powerful, protective love she felt for the new life growing inside her. Chapter 7. The terror had been replaced by a cold, quiet clarity. Luna felt as if she had been living in a thick, confusing fog, and the sight of the shattered vase had been a sudden, violent wind that cleared it all away. She looked at Silas, still on his knees, his face a mask of genuine agony, and for the first time she felt nothing but an immense, profound sadness. He loved her, she knew that. But his love was a cage. She calmly turned away from him and walked to the closet. She pulled out a small overnight bag. Her hands didn't tremble. They were steady and deliberate, moving with a purpose she hadn't felt in months. She packed a few changes of clothes, her passport, a handful of cash, and the small worn compass her grandfather had given her. It wasn't a planned escape. It was a sudden, resolute decision to save her life and the life of her child. She could hear Silas sobbing behind her, his voice broken and full of pleas she no longer heard. "Luna, please. I don't know what happened. It won't happen again, I swear it. I love you. I just need to get the wolf under control. I can do it." Luna didn't respond. She felt a detached pity for him, a sad emptiness. She walked back into the living room and placed the bag by the door. She went to the kitchen and found a pen and paper. Her mind was a whirlwind of emotion, but she didn't let it show. She wrote a short, simple note. "I can't do this anymore. I'm sorry. Goodbye." She placed it on the counter, a final punctuation mark to the life they had built. She looked around the apartment, at the broken vase on the floor, at the new coffee table, at the painting covering the hole in the wall. The apartment was a beautiful testament to his love and a silent monument to his rage. She was done living in a home that was both a sanctuary and a battlefield. She walked out the door and didn't look back. The drive was long, silent, and filled with a profound sense of freedom. The city lights faded into the blackness of the night, and soon she was on a winding, forested road, the kind that reminded her of her childhood. The miles she put between herself and Silas were a physical manifestation of the emotional distance she was creating. Her mind kept replaying the scene from a few hours ago. The vase, the sound of the crash, the flying shards. The memory, once so terrifying, was now a source of quiet strength. She had made a choice. She had chosen life. She drove until the sun began to rise, painting the sky in soft shades of pink and orange. When she finally saw the familiar dirt road that led to her grandfather's cabin, a wave of relief washed over her so powerful it made her vision blur. She was home. She was safe. She was free. She hadn't been in the cabin for years, but it smelled the same, of wood smoke, old books, and memories. The comfort of the familiar surroundings was a balm to her soul. She put her bag down and sank onto the dusty couch, finally letting out a shaky breath she hadn't realized she was holding. She had a few hours of peace before he found her. She knew he would come. He was an alpha. His senses were too powerful, their bond too strong. He would track her scent like a hunter on a trail. She just hoped she had enough time to find the words to end it for good. He arrived a few hours later, just as the sun was at its highest. The sound of a powerful engine on the dirt road was the only warning she had. She heard the car door slam, the sound of his heavy footsteps on the wooden porch. She felt the powerful wave of his energy before she even saw him. He was furious, devastated, and his scent was so sharp with despair it was suffocating. He burst through the front door, his face a mask of rage and heartbreak. His golden eyes were wild, his hair was disheveled, and his suit was wrinkled. He looked like a man who had lost his mind. "Luna," he roared, his voice thick with emotion. "How could you do this? I was worried sick. I thought something happened to you." He moved toward her, his arms outstretched, but Luna held up a hand. The gesture was small, but it was enough to stop him. He froze, his eyes filled with disbelief. "Silas," she said, her voice calm and firm. "We need to talk." "Talk? What is there to talk about? You left. You can't just leave. We're fated mates. We're meant to be together," he pleaded, his voice cracking with emotion. He reached for her, his eyes filled with a desperate, pleading look. The wolf, he took over again. "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry, Luna. I'll change, I swear it. I'll go to therapy. I'll meditate. I'll get him under control. Just come home with me. Please." Luna looked at him, her heart aching with a profound, final grief. He looked so vulnerable, so utterly broken, but she saw the fear in his eyes. He wasn't afraid of losing her. He was afraid of losing control. He wanted her back because she was a part of his world, not because he truly understood the harm he had caused. "Silas," she said, her voice a quiet, resolute whisper. "The vase didn't break itself. You broke it. The wall didn't break itself. You broke it. It wasn't your wolf. It was you. And your love is a storm. I can't live like that anymore. I don't want to be in love with a man who could hurt me or our child." His eyes widened. "Our child." Luna placed a hand on her belly, a protective, powerful gesture that spoke volumes. Yes. And I will not bring a child into a home that is filled with fear. I need to feel safe. His face crumpled in on itself. He looked at her, then at the peaceful cabin, and he finally understood. He had lost. Not because she no longer loved him, but because his love was not enough to make her stay. I can't believe you're choosing this over me, he whispered, his voice broken. I'm not choosing this over you, Silas, Luna said, her voice firm. I'm choosing my peace over your rage. And I'm choosing my child's safety over your promises. He took a step toward her, a last desperate move, and she did the only thing she could. She concentrated, pulling on the deep spiritual bond that tied them together. With a low moan of effort, she began to sever it. The pain was immediate and excruciating. It was a searing, phantom ache in her soul, a violent spiritual tearing. She could feel his own agony, the sharp tearing sensation as the bond was ripped from his soul. He stumbled backward, his hands on his head, his face a mask of shock and pain. No, he whimpered, his voice a broken cry. Luna stood firm, tears streaming down her face, the pain in her heart a profound and final grief. She had done it. She had finally freed herself. She looked at the man who was once her everything, and with a quiet strength she didn't know she possessed, she gave him her final word. It ends with us. Chapter 8. The cabin had become more than just a place of refuge. It was her home. Months had passed since Luna had walked away from Silas, and the emotional bruises were finally beginning to fade. Her world, once filled with shattered glass and whispered apologies, was now a tapestry of quiet moments and simple joys. She had named her son Atlas. He was a beacon of hope, a tiny, perfect piece of her soul. He had his father's dark hair and piercing gaze, a constant reminder of the storm she had escaped, but a reminder she now welcomed. She saw only the potential for love and kindness in his small face. Her days were a quiet, happy routine. She worked from her laptop, sketching animals for clients, her hands finally steady again. Atlas's cooing and giggling were the soundtrack to her life. He was a surprisingly easy baby with a quiet curiosity that made her laugh. She'd put him in a little basket in the yard, and he would watch the hummingbirds with an intense focus that made her heart ache with a gentle kind of love. The fear was gone. The anxiety was a distant memory. She felt free. One crisp autumn morning, a profound need for a change of scenery settled over her. She packed a small bag with a blanket, some snacks, and a thermos of hot tea. She wanted to go to the secluded waterfall, the place that had been theirs, a place of a promise that had been broken, a place that held the memory of a first love and a heart that had been left behind. She felt an urge to face the memory, to honor it and leave it in the past. It was a pilgrimage of a sort, a way of telling herself that she was finally okay. She put Atlas in a carrier and walked the familiar path. The air was crisp. The path was worn but not traveled, and the deeper she went into the woods, the more the silence wrapped around her like a blanket. The journey felt like a metaphor for her life, a long, difficult path with a promise of peace at the end. She finally heard the familiar sound of rushing water, and her heart felt a bittersweet pang of nostalgia. The waterfall was exactly as she remembered it, a curtain of sparkling water that fell into a crystal-clear pool. The air was cool and misted, smelling of moss and clean water. She spread the blanket on the damp ground and Atlas, giggling, grabbed at a fallen leaf. She sat there, drinking her tea, feeling a profound sense of peace. She had come here to let go of the past, to say goodbye to the memory of the boy she had once loved. She was ready. And that's when she heard it, the soft snap of a twig behind her. Her breath caught in her throat. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic rhythm of old fear and a new, terrible dread. She instinctively placed a hand on Atlas, her body rigid with a protective instinct that was now a part of her. She looked up and he was standing there. It was Orion. He was older, his face etched with a quiet wisdom, his body broader, stronger. His eyes were the same deep ancient color of the forest floor, but they were no longer a boy's eyes. They held a sorrow that mirrored her own. His presence radiated a calm, steady strength, a sharp contrast to the intimidating power Silas had wielded. He didn't move, just stood and watched, his gaze filled with a quiet, profound recognition. "Luna," he said, his voice a low, melodic rumble, the sound of home. She couldn't speak. 100 questions, 1,000 emotions, a lifetime of heartbreak swirled in her mind. "You promised," she finally whispered, the words trembling on her lips. He nodded, a deep, sad understanding in his gaze. He slowly, deliberately walked towards her, and she didn't flinch. She watched him as he moved, a quiet grace in his steps. He stopped in front of her, and his eyes fell on Atlas, who was now babbling happily at him. Orion's face softened. He knelt down, his hand outstretched, his movements gentle and calm. Atlas, with the fearlessness of a child, grabbed his finger and giggled. Orion smiled, a genuine, heartbreakingly beautiful thing. "He is beautiful, Luna," he said, his voice a whisper. He looked back up at her, his eyes filled with a grief she recognized instantly. "I never forgot you, Luna. I never broke my promise." He spoke of his sudden disappearance, of a violent, tyrannical alpha who had threatened his pack. My pack had to go into hiding. He was a tyrant. He was Silas's father. The words hit her like a physical blow. The two worlds, the one of her past and the one of her present, slammed into each other with a brutal finality. He had left her to protect her. The boy she had loved had sacrificed their future to save her from a monster whose son had almost destroyed her. Orion's heart had never stopped aching for her, and she had never known. He explained how he had returned to the area months ago, after the old alpha's power had waned. He had been living nearby, watching over her, making sure she was safe. He had seen her leave Silas, had watched her rebuild her life, and had waited for a sign that she was finally ready to be found. He had come here to the waterfall, a promise on his lips and hope in his heart. Their conversation wasn't about a rekindled romance. It was about shared grief, about two people who had been hurt by the same world. He didn't try to kiss her. He didn't try to claim her. He just sat beside her, his quiet presence a profound, healing balm. He was a different kind of alpha. One who had learned that true strength was not in taking but in protecting. He was a love that was calm and steady, a love that did not demand fear. Luna looked at Orion, then at her son, and she felt a sense of overwhelming peace. She had been searching for a place to call home, for a home with no fear. She had finally found it. It wasn't a place. It was a person. Epilogue. Months had passed since Luna had broken the bond and found her way back to the quiet woods. The cabin no longer felt like a place of refuge. It felt like home, a home built not on promises but on peace. Her life was a simple, beautiful rhythm of morning coffee on the porch, afternoons spent sketching in her studio, and evenings filled with the sound of her son's laughter. Atlas was thriving. He was a beacon of pure joy, and his presence was the most powerful testament to the new life she had chosen. Orion was a constant, gentle presence in their world. His love was not a destructive fire, but a calm, steady warmth that healed the emotional scars Silas had left behind. He never told Luna what to do. He never raised his voice. He simply watched her with quiet reverence, his every action a testament to his love and respect. He was an alpha in the truest sense of the word. A protector who did not need to assert his dominance to prove his love. He was a partner, a provider, a friend. He had become a natural father figure to Atlas. He would spend hours with the boy, teaching him the names of the trees and the different bird calls. There was a moment one evening when Luna watched him play with Atlas on the grass. Orion let out a low, playful growl, a soft rumbly sound that made Atlas giggle uncontrollably. Luna's heart, which had once clenched with fear at a similar sound, now felt full with a deep, profound sense of peace. That sound, once a harbinger of violence, was now a sound of love. Their home was a sanctuary, a small, chosen pack built on trust and mutual respect. Orion's pack was still a part of his life, but his heart, his loyalty, was with her and their son. The love between them was not a passionate, all-consuming flame. It was a gentle, unwavering glow that kept them warm on the coldest of nights. It was a love that healed, A love that did not demand fear. The story of her life was no longer one of a girl caught in a storm. It was the story of a woman who had found her way back to the place where she first learned to love and had chosen to build a home with a man who knew that true strength was not in power, but in peace. Thank you for listening to the end. Do you think Luna made the right choice by leaving Silas, and what would you have done if you're in Luna's shoe? Let me know your thoughts in the comment below. Don't forget to like and share the video. Subscribe to my channel if you're new here so you don't miss my new videos.